Hello, welcome to Postcolonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and this is one of my videos in my series on Palestine. And today I'll be talking about a recent report published by Israeli newspaper Haaretz and then further published by CNN. The links to the CNN article are in the description. And the report is about the inhumane, criminal, and violent treatment of Palestinian detainees, especially the ones from Gaza. Now, this has always been the case, as reported by people from the West Bank and Gaza, that the detention conditions for Palestinians in Israeli prison system are deplorable and probably against the Geneva Convention, but obviously there are never many proofs. I personally have talked to at least one person who was detained years ago by the Israeli armed forces and kept in solitary for 14 days. And was eventually let go because there was no case against him. But this report came to light because a physician, a doctor at the military hospital attached with this detention center, and I think it's called Sidi Taiman facility, wrote a letter to the Ministry of Defense pointing out that the things that are being done at the hospital to the detainees point to a violation of Israeli law and probably a violation of Geneva Convention. It has therefore been corroborated and reported by at least two news agencies, Haaretz and CNN. Here are some of the facts. Some of the detainees had to undergo amputations of their legs, at least two that are known, because they were restrained too strongly. Another fact is that Gazan detainees are quadruple restrained. Their hands are bound and their feet are bound. They are fed through straws, and some of them are wearing diapers so that they can't even go to toilet. Some of them are shackled to the fences. Now, I'm not making this up. This is what this physician, a man of conscience, wrote to his own authorities. CNN has also talked to another source about the same place and the treatment of prisoners there. By far, one of the most troubling aspects of this dehumanizing process, because all of these strategies are there to dehumanize the Palestinian prisoners, of course, is that the Palestinians are not addressed by their names by the doctors and medical staff. They're treated as a number. They are given a serial number, which in itself is an ultimate form of dehumanization, because you've reduced a human to a number, a statistics. You've taken away their name. You've taken away their freedom to move by restraining them permanently in permanent restraints, which are causing physical damage and harm, to the point that some of them have to go through amputations because of injuries. But symbolically, historically speaking, this is even more troubling for the Israelis for having done that, because that's exactly what the Nazis did, dehumanized their Jewish captives and remembered them by their numbers and not their names. If you are a supporter of Israel, and you don't find this troubling, I will have to hazard an opinion and say that maybe then in the process of taking sides, you have also lost part of your humanity. Now, I had promised myself and to my viewers in my video about the Gaza genocide, and I'll post a link to it, that I'll spend the rest of my life committed to pointing out the violations of international conventions, the violations of laws, and the violations of human rights conventions by the State of Israel. That is what I will continue doing. And this video obviously is in that vein, that right now in the Israeli prisoners of war camps, Palestinian prisoners, we already know they're being paraded naked, they are blindfolded, and they are constantly restrained so strongly that it is causing injuries and amputations, and that they are treated as statistics, as numbers. These are classic dehumanizing strategies used by all the dictatorial and tyrannical regimes. So what it should force us to think then, and those of you who would criticize me for this video, you always do the whataboutism, right? You do the deflection. What about Hamas? I don't really care what Hamas does, because Hamas, no one assigns to Hamas the role of a civilized nation state. In worst case scenario, they are called a terrorist organization. So if Israel has to prove that they are a democracy that cares about rule of law and human dignity, then their actions cannot be made to look better because Hamas does it too. They cannot compare themselves with a terroristic organization and justify their own actions. I mean, the myth in the West, at least in the United States, is that Israel is this beacon of light surrounded by darkness, right, and forces that are out to destroy it. If it is that beacon of lightness, then how can it treat human beings in such inhumane ways and not follow the international conventions and their own laws in treating prisoners of war? In my opinion, this is what happens to nations that carve out a space in their national imagination which is militarized, and whose leaders in one way or the other have convinced themselves that they live in a state of exception and the rules of war and peace and the global rules do not apply to them, and that they can mount a propaganda campaign that will undo the damage of any actions that they do. I think these actions come from an extreme form of hubris. And I had pointed out in my earlier video that we have gone past the point where propaganda and the machinery of international media could erase these truths from the public sphere. This story is already being covered by CNN, by an Israeli newspaper. Granted that CNN is not going to do a special on it for 30 minutes, but it's out there, right? A person of conscience who's Israeli and who's a physician pointed it out as wrong to his own authorities. That must be acknowledged and respected. And overall, you, me, and everyone else who believes in human dignity, we have to ask this question. I have to ask this question of our government in the United States. Are you aware of it? What are you going to do about it? If this is what is being done to the prisoners by a power that calls itself the only democracy in the Middle East, which considers itself a noble nation state, its army as a noble army. And if you are doing this, which has been factually reported and proven, what does it teach us about what you do when nobody is reporting and watching, right? And what moral authority then are you left with? You're already bombing the most densely populated part of the world. You're starving people. You're killing women and children, while also trying to maintain the victim status. I think these two things are irreconcilable. So, the reason I am talking about this and posting this video here is to make sure that that story that CNN is reporting after it's gone, because that's how their newspaper feed works online, that this video is there pointing to these instances and reminding us, you, me, and everyone else who comes to this channel that this happened, is happening. Prisoners are being dehumanized by Israeli armed forces. They are being reduced to numbers, and they are physically being harmed by the restraints, the handcuffs that are being used to keep them handcuffed and restrained. And that we have to remember that. And we have to then extrapolate from that and realize that so much more is happening and could be happening, which is not being reported. So from me, this is a public testimony of the treatment of Palestinian prisoners at one Israeli facility which has been caught and which is being reported. And for you, me, and everyone else who cares about human dignity, this is a lesson, maybe a cautionary tale, but also a promise to ourselves that we will not stay quiet and we'll continue speaking against any atrocities being committed by the Israeli armed forces. That's all for this video. Thank you so much. Stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll be back with more. Until then, as always, from me to you, peace and love.